we turn our attention to the Murphy Show hotline. Our good friend Brink Fidler stands by. Of course, Brink is the head of Defend Systems. I talk about Defend quite often as an organization that we lean on for life safety and work and school and church consultation, really any place that people gather. But Brink is here today in regard to the 2-year anniversary of the tragedy of the Covenant School shootings, and he joins us on the Murphy Show hotline. Brink, I hope you're well, my friend.
I am doing well. I'm just getting back into town from working with some schools. So,
were you over?
Want to be out of town? Sorry.
Were you over in Knoxville?
We were. Yep.
Does that drive? Is it just me? I've only been here 3 years, right? 3.5 years now. But for me, the drive to Knoxville or in the Knoxville area, you think it's an hour. Mentally, I think it's an hour and a half, and it's not an hour and a half. You know, does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. We actually talked about this as a team. We go to Memphis a lot, Chattanooga. The drive to Knoxville it flies by and it's easy. I went to college there, so I'm used to making a lot. But yeah, it was an easy drive. But we're back in town fighting Nashville traffic.
Well, Nashville traffic's never really fun. Home. Well, look, I don't know about you, but simultaneously, and maybe it's this way for a lot of dates and a lot of moments in our lives, but for me, the Covenant School tragedy seems simultaneously 10 years ago and yesterday.
Yeah, same. And we present, it's part of our training now, right? I mean, we touch on that event just from a training perspective because of all the outstanding things that did happen there amongst the tragedy. And, it's still hard every day, if I'm being totally honest, just to even talk about it and got to remember the crime scene walkthrough and all the stuff that flashes back beforehand. But, today, it was, I covered it today. It was a lot tougher today, for sure. Because to your point, I mean, in that regard, it feels like yesterday.
When I bring this up, and I want to address this and move on from it, talk to you about maybe some things that we've learned over the last 2 years and things that we perhaps haven't learned over the last 2 years. But invariably, when we bring it up, and even when I talk to you about it, I have to address it. Folks want to know about the manifesto. I just regret the day that this word was ever brought up in reference to the writings of the individual responsible for the death of 6 of our neighbors and our loved ones. But it was, and sadly, people are still convinced that there's some sort of essay or paragraph, journal or whatever that's out there that we haven't seen. It's not really true. The nature of the mental state of this individual is pretty well established, that they were crazy and determined to kill as many people as possible. Is that a fair assessment, Brink?
It is, and I agree with you. The word manifesto never should have been used. It's the writings of an extremely mentally ill person who, wanted to inflict as much damage as possible. Lived with a lot of hate inside of them. Had been planning a school shooting for over 10 years, and more than one person knew about that. And the school, it turned out, was not her intended first target, and the intended first target was much larger, but they had a much more robust security presence, and she felt like she couldn't get the numbers she wanted and couldn't contain. So I mean, obviously some of the writings have been leaked so people could see for themselves. I mean, there's no clear motive. It's just the ramblings of a mentally ill person who wanted to inflict harm, and it's not going to help. You and I talk about this all the time offline, but I always look at, okay, is there anything that could come from that that's going to help prevent the next one? And if the answer is no, then I'm moving on. Like, it doesn't matter to me. Like, if it won't help prevent the next thing, then I'm not concerning myself with it. That's a colossal waste of time. But you talk about this all the time. If people want to make sense of the senseless, and I get it. So we crave that closure and we crave that understanding, and we crave information. And, where there's a lack of information, obviously there's supposition, and that's created a lot of the problem here.
I don't know that I've ever said this out loud, at least on air, but when you were talking, Brink, it occurs to me, in some ways, the fact that this woman was transgender actually hurt our clarity on the fact that it was a mental illness that led her to what she did. And I'm not saying that that wasn't a part of it, but people wanted to connect things that ultimately were not necessarily connected. Now, maybe the media reacted in such a way that they did because of that element of all of this, but I don't know how much of that had to do with the mental illness that led to the tragedy that happened 2 years ago.
Yeah, no, a lot of people, made a lot of assumptions about what may or may not have happened to her, at that school, and
right.
Why she targeted the school. But historically speaking, and on some of her own words, I mean, that was one of the happiest times of her life was at that school. So part of the reason she wanted to die there. So it's just, we're never going to make sense of the senseless and understand the mental, acuity of a person that's that mentally ill. And, it doesn't, again, if it doesn't help stop the next one or give us some good lessons learned, I mean, I try to just hit it and move on so that we can focus on what we can control. And that's, helping people learn what to do if they find themselves facing their worst day.
You, and before we talk about some of the lessons, you obviously had very personal connections with a lot of people at the school. You advised them in a lot of different ways, worked with folks at the school, and you had a lot of connections with people that responded to the situation that happened 2 years ago, the school shooting. For those that are remain in your circle, and I'm not asking for particular names or whatnot, but how are these folks doing? How are they getting along?
It depends. It depends on which one, to be honest with you. So we all process trauma differently. We all heal differently. I was literally right before I called into you, I was on the phone with a Covenant mom, and talking to her about the chapel service today and kind of all those things. So it just depends. Everybody's on their own healing journey, and I mean everything from the family members that lost loved ones to teachers to families that didn't lose their kids but had kids in the classrooms that were shot to pieces or had kids that saw a bunch of very traumatic things, to the officers. And even the officers are dealing with it in different ways. We've been talking to them more and more recently, and it's been interesting to hear kind of where everybody is and how they got there. And they're all so different because all people process trauma differently. And none of it's wrong, right? That's a big takeaway, is like, you may think what they're doing is wrong. Well, that's the way they process it. And so, it's to each his own in there. And that's one of the biggest lessons that I've learned from talking to a lot of these people. I had mentioned to you a while back, that we were going to do just a short series of interviews on our podcast with some of the first responders, some of the moms, some of the teachers, and that's out. So we interviewed Michael Clazo, and that episode came out Tuesday. I know you asked me to tell you when, and I'm just now realizing I forgot. So sorry about that.
That's all good.
So you hear some of those stories and hear about that day, but how they're doing since then, how they're processing some of it. So we talked to several of them about this. To learn and be a better resource for people that may go through this again.
And are there specific lessons that you take away? And I know that you've incorporated it into some of the training that you use with defense systems. If I asked you, what did you learn out of the tragedy of March 27th, 2023? How would you respond?
That training our people that are going to find themselves in the event is still the most important thing we can do. The data supports it from every one of these events. Obviously Rex and Jeff and Colazo and all those guys did an amazing job when they got there and they hit that door and they went to hunt down evil. But what people have to understand is that for 14 minutes, it was those teachers versus that gunman, period. So if that doesn't drive the point home for the importance of preparation around this, the good guys are always coming, but what are we doing in the meantime to stand in the gap, and what kind of knowledge are we giving our people? And every school should be a fortress, to keep bad guys out. I don't disagree with that, but people have to understand that over 80% of school shootings are conducted by a current or former staff or student, and 90% of that 80 are students. So they're going to know how to get your building. I mean, you can have Fort Knox, but if they went to school there or go there, they know how to get in. So back to what needs to be first is, do the people in the building who are standing in the gap, do they know how to respond appropriately while we're waiting on law enforcement to arrive and handle the problem? Yes or no? And that, that's the biggest takeaway for us, is that is still the most important thing.
What about, and I don't know where we are in the process, and forgive me for not knowing, but there was a suggestion that we figure out a way for fire alarms to be different in their sound based on what type of evacuation we're talking about, whether it's an actual fire-based evacuation or whether it's an intruder-based evacuation. Would you agree with that? That perhaps that is something that would make sense? But because for those who don't know, in this case, I think it's fair to say that that everyone involved in Covenant, I know it's hard for me to say this because 6 people lost their lives, but everyone involved did everything right? I mean, it could have been far worse, in other words.
Yeah, no, the teachers performed
incredibly.
Yeah. I walked that crime scene, so I know everything that happened in there and when, and they did a remarkable job. There was a bill that passed last year that now allows people in the school setting to identify the source of the fire alarm before they evacuate. So instead of just rushing out the door, now, there's a law that supports, hey, you can determine the source of that fire, that sensor, or that alarm before you ever evacuate. And that's what we've been recommending for schools, to be honest with you, ever since Parkland, Florida, because the same exact thing happened in Parkland, Florida.
Right.
3-story building. He shoots a bunch of people on the first floor it sets off the fire alarm because all the smoke. The kids on the 3rd floor and the teachers on the 3rd floor didn't hear the gunshots, so they evacuate. And that's why you remember the dots diagram. But when he gets to that 3rd floor in Parkland, the hallway's full of kids for the same reason.
Right.
So, that's another big takeaway is, hey, pump the brakes. No school in America is going to burn down in 5 seconds. I mean, we fixed all that. So
right.
Let's determine the source of the fire alarm, because now it's gotten kids killed twice.
What more needs to be done, Brink? I mean, is there anything specifically that we need to direct our lawmakers to do? Is there more individually that we can do? Is there more that teachers can do and administration?
So teachers, usually their hands are tied, right? So administration, yes, make sure you get quality training for your people. And hear me when I say it doesn't, not us, just make sure you're getting good quality training for your people, because they are the difference makers. A lot of school administrators think their teachers can't handle this kind of training, and it has to be done correctly, right? I mean, you can't come in and traumatize a bunch of teachers, but that is a huge takeaway. As far as lawmakers go, I was lucky enough, William Lambert asked me to speak to the Republican side of the House a few months ago. And so they're aware, and there's some things that are being worked on legislatively this year, and hopefully some more next year that we can do to better around this topic. I've told all them, and I'll tell your entire audience, we have a real opportunity as a state to be thought leaders in this space and let the rest of the country follow us. And I really hope we take that opportunity to do that, because there is a real opportunity to have meaningful movement here and do some things that are very meaningful. But again, preparing the people that find themselves in the event with the knowledge of what to do is the most important. One thing I'll say, and I know we're up against a time crunch here, but people need to know about the decisions those officers made that day too. Like, everybody knows they went in there and took down the bad guy, and that's their job. But, they knew before they got there that they were going to a rifle fight. The dispatcher had told them it's a male in camouflage with a rifle. Well, Collazo is actually the first one in the building, and he goes in with a pistol and soft armor, which means it's not set up for a rifle. And he had heavy gear and a rifle, but he left it because seconds mattered. There were kids in that building, and he needed to get in there. Rex, yeah, he gets his rifle out, but he leaves his heavy gear. So both those guys went in there wearing the equivalent of a T-shirt, right? I mean, for a rifle fight, but they did it anyway. Jeff Mathis didn't hesitate. When Rex pulled that door open, Jeff was the first one stepping in that gap with that shotgun to start clearing with Rex. And do you know that prior to that day, Rex Engelbert and Jeff Mathis had never even seen each other?
Wow.
So, if you get to meet these guys, I hope, people will shake their hand, hug their neck, whatever it is, because they made decisions that day that easily doubled and tripled their chances of dying. But they did it anyway. And I think the general public doesn't know that kind of stuff, and I think it's really important that they do.
Hey, how can people find your conversation that you've had on your podcast? How can we locate it?
The easiest thing to do is if you follow us on social, or they're on our social media. The name of the podcast is Tips, Tactics, and Tools for a Safer Tomorrow, but the easiest way to find it is just on our social media, whether that's Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. It's all in all those places.
Brink, I appreciate you. You know how much. Thank you for everything that you do for our community, and thank you for being willing to talk about, just one of the worst days. And I know I know you talk about bad things a lot, but you do it for a reason, and that is to try to save lives down the road, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate your time, Matt.